Welcome everyone to a virtual tour of Springbrook Water Reclamation Center. My name is Amy and I work for Naperville as a technical specialist. If you were here in person, we would start with a presentation in our classroom, pass around some examples, then go for a walk outside. What you will see today is the same classroom presentation with several videos added in. To keep the tour short enough to fit into a class period and appropriate for a range of ages, I will keep my discussion general, but the slides still have the more technical detail some of you may be looking for. For those of you who have been here before, watch for a few bonus areas that are not part of our regular tour. Okay, let's get started with this photo here of Springbrook. You can see most of our facility in this view. The DuPage River is in the background along that tree line, and Bolingbrook is in the far background on the other side of the river. Before we get into what we do here at Springbrook, a little bit about our drinking water. Naperville water comes from Lake Michigan. We are fortunate to have this very reliable source. The lake water gets cleaned at a treatment plant in Chicago to make it safe to drink. If you search Jardine water in Google Earth, you'll find it on the lake right next to Navy Pier. Clean water comes out to Naperville through underground tunnels and pipes. Water has to be under pressure or it wouldn't come out when you turn on the faucet. Water towers help maintain that pressure using gravity. The weight of the water up high pushes on the water in the pipes down below. There is always new water coming in from Chicago, but we also keep some in storage so there's enough to keep up with demand, like on a hot summer day when people are using more water or when firefighters need to fight a fire. Here is a short video of one of our drinking water sites. We have two round concrete tanks here and a water tower. Together, they can hold close to 13 million gallons. Ever wondered what it looks like inside a water tower? They are all a little different, but these are typical pumps and pipes for a system our size. When you're driving around town, try to spot some of our other tanks and towers. Now wastewater, which is our focus today. This is the dirty water after we use it. It's more than just what we flush down our toilets and sinks. Think of some places that use a lot of water, like hospitals and factories, and what might be in their water. We could make a really long list, but in general, it's food, medication, detergents, oils, and chemicals. We need a way to make this water clean again. Here is an animation of how the pipes and lift stations work to get wastewater to Springbrook. We install the pipes at a slope, so gravity does most of the work, but we can only go so deep, which is why lift stations are needed too. The lift stations pump the wastewater up from a deeper pipe to a shallower pipe, so it can continue along by gravity again. These are some of the pipes and valve samples I would pass around the classroom so you can get an idea of the different materials, weights, and sizes used for both water and wastewater. If you look under your sink, for example, you should be able to find the hot and cold pipes coming in and the drain pipe going out. The pipes under your sink are pretty small because they only need to be big enough for that one sink. The pipes coming in and out of your house will be a little bigger because they supply the whole house. And the pipes out under the street or sidewalk are even bigger because they supply your whole neighborhood. This is a summary of the treatment process we use here at Springbrook. As you can see, we end up with two products at the end, biosolids and water. Biosolids are rich in nutrients and applied to farm fields as fertilizer, and the treated water goes into the DuPage River. I want you to think about the things you recycle. If you throw a bottle into a recycle bin, it ends up at a facility where it is cleaned and made into something new. But that bottle only gets recycled if you threw it in the correct bin. When you flush a toilet, wash your hands, or do some laundry, the dirty water automatically comes here for us to recycle for you. You didn't have to do anything special to make that happen. Amazing, isn't it? You can probably already guess what happens at each step listed here just by their names. As we go through each one, see how many you guessed correctly. I'll show you some before and after samples to keep in mind as we learn about the process. This first one here is what the dirty water looks like before any treatment. Notice the dirt or solids floating around in there. After treatment, we get this clear water at the end. This is what goes into the DuPage River. And the biosolids are kind of fluffy and soft and easy to spread out on farm fields. This last jar is from one of the in-between steps, where the solids that are heavier than water settle to the bottom. Imagine if you took a spoonful of dirt, mixed it in a glass of water, and then set it aside for a while. When you check on it later, you should see something similar to this in your glass. The very first thing we do to remove larger solids is called screening. This is mostly stuff we shouldn't be flushing in the first place. We get a lot of disposable wipes here, which tend to clump together and cause blockages. Even those that are labeled as flushable don't break down fast enough. Other things that cause problems are paper towels, rags, diapers, feminine products, Q-tips, dental floss, plastics, and anything else you can think of that isn't toilet paper. Please throw all of these things in the trash. Toilet paper is really the only thing okay to flush. Next, we remove some smaller solids that get past the screening step. Grit is not biodegradable, and we don't want it in our biosolids, so we take it out early in the process here. The screenings and the grit go to the landfill, just like your trash. Everything else after this step gets recycled. Here we have huge mixing tanks, which are really important to the biological process. There are tiny bugs in these tanks that are only visible under a microscope. They occur naturally, and our waste is food to them. All we have to do is add air to give them the oxygen they need. The word aeration means to add air. To clarify means to make something clearer, right? That's exactly what these clarification tanks are doing. Picture that glass of dirty water again. After allowing the dirt to settle, you could carefully pour off most of the water into a second glass, leaving the dirt behind. You should be left with a glass of really dirty water and a glass of much cleaner water. It's not completely clean, but it's one step closer. First, we will follow where the water goes from here and come back to the solids later. Next is filtration. Our filters are buried underground and filled with sand. The sand traps smaller particles that made it past all the previous steps. You can do your own experiment and fill a coffee filter or a piece of fabric with clean sand. Then pour some dirty water through it over a clear container. Does the water come out cleaner? How well your filter works will depend on many factors such as the type of sand, how much sand, and how dirty the water is. The last step for water is disinfection. You probably already know that even if water looks clean, it can still have germs in it that can make us sick. This is why pool water smells like chlorine. The chlorine disinfects the water to make it safe for swimming. Here, we use chlorine to disinfect the water to make it safe for the river. And here is the clean water going out into the DuPage River. You can trace the DuPage River over 1,700 miles all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. There is an online tool called USGS Streamer where you can click on any river to find out how it's connected to other rivers and where it goes. That red line there is a trace of the DuPage River. Let's go outside to follow the flow of water through all the steps we just learned about. This is our screening building. Inside this building, we have 3 identical machines. Only one of them is running today. The incoming wastewater is flowing through a channel deep underneath this building. The rotating rakes are inside these tall cabinets. On video, it's difficult to see what is happening through the floor grate. So I'll go downstairs and show you this from down below. The rakes are dipping under the water and pulling the trash up to the surface. And here's what comes out the other side. Use your imagination to guess what it might smell like in here and why this is the least popular stop on our tour. Yuck. Back outside to fresh air and over to grit removal. Recognize that water tower from earlier? Although it is close by, remember, it is part of a completely separate drinking water system. Okay, here we are on top of our 2 concrete grit tanks. The grit is coming out of the bottom of these tanks and over to this building where it gets washed and dried in these machines that look like giant funnels. Here's a close-up of the grit. Six of our 7 aeration tanks are right here behind the grit building. This is the water coming from the grit tanks into the aeration tanks. Each aeration tank has 4 sets of mixers. The splashing helps get more air into the water for the bugs. I'll walk along the entire length of one of these tanks to give you an idea how big they are. And I'll turn on the sound for a little bit here. This is an identical tank on the other side, which I'll speed past. Here is one of our 7 clarifiers. Notice the water is very still. This is to allow those solids to settle out. We have 2 smaller original clarifiers from the early 70s and 5 bigger ones added later. This is one of the originals. The clarified water pours over the weirs near the outer edge, and those open boxes with the ramps along the inner ring catch what gets skimmed off the top. That contraption right there is the skimmer itself, which moves around the tank so slowly you can hardly tell it's moving. Around the other side, the clarified water flows out of the tank here. Then over into our 13 sand filters. Not much to see because they are buried underground. Those pipes that look like candy canes are air vents. And last step for water is disinfection. That small amount of chlorine bleach trickling into the water is all it takes to disinfect the water. As we walk across the middle, these are actually two separate tanks side by side. The water flows through these tanks like a maze to give the chlorine time to work. Here is the second chemical getting added at the end of each tank. This is the chemical that removes any excess chlorine so it doesn't get out into the river. Now we'll go down to the river. It's a very pretty area with lots of wildlife. We have a permit from the Illinois EPA that tells us all the things we need to do to make sure our water is safe to discharge. If you ever take a river trip through Naperville Kayak, their route goes right past here. Even when the river floods up higher than the top of this pipe, there is enough pressure, the water will still flow out. Cleaning water from beginning to end takes less than a day. Back to the presentation to find out how we make biosolids, which takes much longer. This middle photo is from one of the lab tests we do to make sure the solids are settling to the bottom of the clarifier like they should. The better the solids settle, the easier it is to remove them. It's those solids at the bottom we are going to follow now. Digestion is a word you all know. Just like how our stomachs digest food, these tanks digest those solids we've been talking about. We help the process along by mixing and adding air. I'm guessing most of you have blown into a straw in your drink to make bubbles, right? You are pushing air into the bottom of the glass and it bubbles up to the top. Same concept here. When these tanks are filled with liquid, the air comes in through those rows of round discs along the bottom of the tank and bubbles up to the top. Thickening is how we remove excess water from the digesters. These thickeners have a rotating belt with holes just big enough to allow water to flow through, but the solids stay on top. The solids get thicker as the belt moves from one side to the other, and the thickened solids then get returned to the digesters. You'll get a better view of these on our tour in a little bit. And here is the last step for solids. You may be familiar with the term centrifuge. It's a machine that spins super fast to separate what's inside, like how a washing machine spins the rinse water out of clothes, or how a salad spinner spins water out of lettuce. Here, the centrifuges remove enough water to turn liquid biosolids into a solid. We store finished biosolids in this building until the farmers are ready for it, usually in the spring before they plant or in the fall after their harvest. We hire a contractor to truck it out to the farm fields and apply it. Now for the second part of our tour, this time following the solids that come off the bottom of the clarifiers. Here are the pumps that return solids to aeration. Just the middle one is on today. Different pumps move the solids that are ready for digestion over here into one of 6 digesters. They are covered to keep the rain out and the heat in. I'll go up on top of another one to give you a better view of the piping. That big pipe coming out of that far building carries the air into the bottom of these tanks. We'll go in there next to see the machines that generate and push this air. These are called blowers. Picture how a leaf blower uses a motor to push air, but much bigger and more powerful. Now back to that building between the digesters we skipped past. These are our 2 gravity belt thickeners. You already saw a video clip of these earlier, but I'll walk around to give you a better view from a few different angles. The belts rotate around just like a treadmill on a really slow setting. The solids stay on top and the water flows through the belt and out the bottom. The 2 machines are identical, just facing opposite directions. The liquid side is the beginning of the process, and the solid side is the end of the process. A couple interesting things to mention as we walk to our next stop. A local astronomy club has an observatory on our property. You can check their website for events open to the public. It's called the Naperville Astronomical Association. I know it's hard to see with all this movement, but that white dome off in the distance is their telescope. And soon we will have new solar panels over in this area I will be able to show off on future tours. This 500,000 gallon tank holds the liquid biosolids coming from the digesters. From here, the biosolids go into the centrifuge building. Our 2 centrifuges are upstairs. That water you see there coming out of that pipe is just so we can observe and test the water. We feed liquid biosolids into one end, and the dried biosolids drop out the other end and through the floor onto a conveyor belt down below. This is the solids end, and we are now walking back towards the liquid end, or the beginning of the process. A polymer is added to help get the consistency we want. Here is the conveyor from downstairs. It moves the biosolids from this building over into storage. And here is the storage building. We just did fall hauling about a month before this video, so there is a lot of open space in here. By spring, this building will be mostly full. Here is the end of the conveyor we just saw inside the other building. So now you know how biosolids are made. Just a few more slides before we finish up. Here are some of those microscopic bugs we talked about earlier. We can tell a lot about how well our plant is running by what kinds of bugs we see under the microscope. Some are good and some are bad. These bugs help us decide when it's time to make adjustments. If these little guys interest you, maybe microbiology is for you. This is one of our labs here at Springbrook, where we do the testing that is crucial to operations. Just like the bugs, lab results also help us decide when it's time to make adjustments. Our lab is staffed with 2 full-time employees plus a part-time intern. SCADA is an acronym for the computer program we use to help us run our system. This is a screenshot of Springbrook. We have 8 operators, and there is always someone here 24/7. We have a separate maintenance crew of 4. Altogether, we have 24 employees at Springbrook, and we are just one division of a much larger water department. Remember all that stuff you shouldn't be flushing? Not pleasant to look at, but important to see. Clogs cause backups and can be expensive to fix. We do inspect and clean our sewers, but the best solution is to keep this stuff out of the sewer to begin with. The rates you pay are based on how much it costs us to maintain everything. When you flush something you shouldn't, think about the worker on the other end that has the dirty job of clearing these clogs. And speaking of jobs, the water industry is an excellent choice for so many reasons. Water is essential. No matter what is happening in the world, the need for water and sanitation doesn't go away. There is something for everyone, whether you have a degree or not. You can work directly for a utility, for a supporting company or agency, public or private. You can travel or stay local, work outside or in an office, for a small town or a large city. Workforwater.org is a great place to find information on water careers. And finally, here are a few of our partners, and I will leave you with a couple reminders. Number 1, never dump anything into a storm drain. That water goes directly into our rivers. It does not come here for treatment. And number 2, never flush medication. We have drop boxes at the police station and all 10 of our fire stations. Here is how to reach me with questions and how to get to our survey. Teachers, please send me your school, grade, and how many students attended. I hope you enjoyed your tour and thank you for listening.